Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm so excited to share this space with you today. My name is EUrban. I'm the host of Career Coffee Chat Live and the podcast. And I'm a executive coach. And what I do is focus on career acceleration for driven and emerging and evolving leaders who want those career roadblocks removed so you can experience more income, more influence, and impact. And as I get over my tongue tiedness today, because it's a beautiful day here. If you're listening to the podcast, it may be a colder day by the time we get around to replaying the show. But right now, it's a beautiful day, and I have the sunshine in front of me. Most importantly, we have a great guest for you today to talk about that mid-career crisis and what happens when we have that mid-career wake-up call. Some of it's earlier for us and some of it's later for us, but inevitably it happens. And over the past year and a half, we've had a lot of professionals having a wake-up moment, if you will. For the first time in our lives, we've stopped our busy rush forward and actually had a moment to pause, what I call a pandemic pause. And from that pause, we've had a few questions. What am I doing with my career? Do I even like what I'm doing? I don't. What do I do? So there's a lot of questions on the horizon, a lot of change, not only in our socio-economic structures, but also for us personally as professionals. So what we're going to do today is have an amazing guest on for you to share what it takes to empower your career and advance yourself as a professional. Great to see you, Amy, tuning in. It is a beautiful day in Houston, she says. It is a wonderful day. So if you're just tuning in, come on in, share this space with us in time. Don't be shy, ask your questions. Tell us your name, tell us where you're coming from, because we want to welcome you to the show. Now, more about my awesome guest, Carol Parker Walsh. PhD, JD. I'm underqualified here. She will be talking about career crisis to career clarity. If you're not sure what to do, but you don't like your current career path, or maybe you're not quite sure what to do moving forward, this is the right place for you today. So discover how to unabashedly take charge of your career pivot and make it your success story. And I love this quote by Carol. She says, tear up the rule book and write your own. Her mission is to empower high achieving women at midlife to get unstuck and take control back of your life, of your career. Now, not only that, she's a TEDx speaker, two-time best-selling author, international keynote speaker, award-winning consultant, and has been the go-to coach for Grammy Award winners, Paralympic Gold Medalists, Fortune 500 executives, and many, many successful driven professionals and entrepreneurs. Without further ado, I want to welcome to the show Carol Parker Walsh. It's such a pleasure to have you on today.
Hi, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here too. Yeah, so I want to say hi to all of you as you come in. As you mentioned before, don't be shy. Put your questions, put your comments in the chat. We're here for you. We want to make sure that this moment is also yours too. And if you're watching the replay later or the podcast, feel free to reach out directly or comment on the replay itself. We will be notified and we'll get back to you. So, Carol, I am curious. You have all these acronyms after your name. You're a PhD, you're a JD. What made you make that massive transition yourself, that pivot yourself into something that's lifting others up? What made you do that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think in my own career journey, I've made a few pivots myself in really trying to find and explore what it was that really sung to my heart or made sense for me, or really utilize my skills and my gifts, my natural genius or talents in the best possible way. But it was really a life-altering event that really crystallized for me that it's time that I really leaned into and focused on what was important for me and not what I thought I should do or other things. So I was working on a weekend like high achieving professional women do. And I was driving home with my kiddos in the car, and they were small at the time. And I was in a near fatal car accident. And so, coming home, it was a Sunday. It wasn't too late, but I was on a 2-lane road and saw lights coming my way. And on either side of me, one was a drop off into a really deep ravine, and the other was oncoming traffic in the side of a hill. But, for me, what was pivotal is that I heard a voice as if it was sitting in the car next to me that said, turn now. And I remember at the time thinking, turn where? Because the options were less than optimal, but I made the turn. I did get hit. Had multiple surgeries in a wheelchair for 6 months. It was really life altering. But the thing that kept going on and on in my mind was that voice that said, turn now. And I thought about that. Like, how many times have I heard, or many of us have heard throughout our lives or careers, that said, is this really what you want to do? Should you do something
Right.
different? Is it time to go? Like, we hear our own versions of turn now, but we often ignore it. And because the options don't seem optimal, right? We look to the left and the right, and it's like, to do what? To go where? Because this is what I know. This is what's making me money. This is what I'm comfortable with. This is what, people know me for. And so the idea of shifting out of that, and what will happen, because we don't know what we don't know. We don't know if the left or the right is going to be a good or bad. And most of the times in life, the options aren't glorious and fabulous and horrible and miserable, right? They're usually the choice between two things that we're not quite sure about. So many people stay on the path because they don't know what to do. And in many ways, what I equate that to is, if I'd have stayed on the path, I would have literally died that day. But I think a lot of us die just emotionally and spiritually. We get burnt out, we get overwhelmed, we get frustrated, we're stuck, we're unhappy. We have a different type of kind of demise, if you will, by just staying the course and not listening to that voice intuitively that's begging and crying out for us to make a move, to like make a turn. And so that haunted me and stuck with me. And that began the process for me to say, you know what? I'm going to choose a different path and start listening to myself and my intuition, and not follow some pre-described way that I've been following to get where I am in my career.
That's fantastic. And for one thing, I'm glad you're here.
Me too.
I'm glad you listened to that voice and did not, move on from this plane of living that day, and stayed with us and here to guide so many professionals who are empowering and uplifting themselves in their career. So
yeah,
that's a very moving story. Yeah.
Thank you. And at the time, I had been doing research. So my research and my doctoral work was around gender and identity development, and how women kind of understand who they are, and the relationship of how that determines how we figure out what we want to do, and antithesis of all these messages that we get, and the implications in organizational kind of settings. So I was studying and researching that, and what I really realized is that I wanted to really help and work directly with women in making that transition, and not just research and study it, but to actually get in the trenches, actually apply it, and, give women the tools and the support that they need to actually go through that process and do it successfully.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, for any of you tuning in now or later, how many times you've heard that little voice, and do you actually listen to that little voice, or do you ignore it? And it's interesting you mentioned the car crash, because a very similar thing happened for me as well. I had been kind of ignoring that little voice. You know how sometimes we're like, oh, that doesn't make sense at the time. And I just had this feeling that I did not want to drive, to the point where I was in tears. I did not want to drive that day. And I tried to get someone else to drive me, and I tried to get someone to come along and drive me. For some reason, I just didn't want to drive. And it's not that I have a problem driving, but that day I just had this feeling of dread. Went ahead and did it, and sure enough, car crash, head went into the windshield, ruined my knees for the rest of my life. Well, okay, to be fair, I did a lot of personal physical therapy, and my knees are doing fantastic, considering they told me I'd have them replaced by the time I was 35, and face messed up, concussion, you name it. So not quite as bad as your experience, but it was very interesting. And after that moment, I did not ignore the little voice. No longer ignored the voice. To the point where I get a feeling, and I tell my family, I say, look, I don't know why I'm getting this feeling. It doesn't make logical sense, but I know this is what needs to be done. It will come clear later, because other times I've ignored it. Not such a big deal. But has it worked out for you too, Carol, or maybe people you've talked to that they've ignored it, and then later they're like, oh, that's what that meant.
That's exactly right. And I think it's so powerful that you shared that, because I believe really deeply that particularly women ignore that voice, that we
Mhm.
have been taught not to trust ourselves, not to trust our
Mhm.
instinct, to rely on somebody else's wisdom and opinions and thoughts, and not really trust what we know to be truthful within ourselves. So
Mhm.
I think a lot, yes, that happens a lot. When I work with my clients, many of them will say, I heard that voice 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but it seemed impractical, or it didn't make any sense, or whatever justification that we gave it not to listen to it, until it
Mhm.
became so overwhelming that we had no other choice that to follow it. I think that happens more time than not. That little inkling, that whisper, that feeling,
Mhm.
that voice. I heard it years ago. I knew it a long time ago. I heard it multiple times. I could look back. And had I followed my own instinct and not cared about what other people thought, or worried about, well,
Mhm.
what will happen, but just really kind of trust my gut and my instinct. So many things I could have avoided, with that. But I
Right.
really believe that as women, we're not taught to do that. Like, it's like an emotional thing, or something that
Mhm.
people kind of poo
Mhm.
poo, but there's really
Yeah.
tremendous wisdom that we have as women through our intuition. And so absolutely. Yeah. I've,
Absolutely.
I've, I've
Yeah.
definitely heard that story before.
Yeah. And I've heard it too, and not just from women, also from men. Like, I kind of knew, but I didn't pay attention, because we logic ourselves out of it, or well, that doesn't really make sense. Like
Yes.
right now, with the data I have right in front of me. So
Hmm.
outside of some mysterious feeling about a car crash, I know that at the neuroscience level, just to explain the gut feeling a little bit. Now, does it cover all of these instances? Perhaps not. Science has only gone so far. And as my
Yeah.
valid doctors, I go to some great, high class doctors in Houston. There's medical centers fantastic there, and he's super smart. And he said, we're just in our infancy in the science. He goes, we're just baby steps. There's so much we haven't uncovered yet, and it's so much exciting. But irregardless, what the neuroscience knows right now is that gut feeling, because it's a feeling, it's rarely ever words. Like the words we hear, well, I'm not going to go there. Like, it's something that cannot be explained through scientific
Hmm.
moment, but the feeling you get is pretty
Hmm.
reason.
Yeah.
Our limbic brain remembers everything you ever do. It's a
Yes.
massive supercomputer, and
Yes.
it's calculating all this stuff. So when they say sleep on it, it gives it time to run through all these things. When you get that gut feeling, you can't really express or articulate it. It's probably coming from that area, just saying, hey, based on everything you've ever experienced, the likelihood of X or Y, you might want to take a look at this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it has memory. I think that
Mhm.
that part of our brain, kind of comes pre-programmed. It's like buying a computer that's already kind of loaded in with the software,
Yeah.
because it has this memory of from primitive times of,
Mhm.
that gut instinct was a survival instinct. It's the thing
Yeah.
that kept us safe. It's the thing that tells us not to go down dark alleys, at 2 o'clock in the
Mhm.
morning, or sometimes we do listen to it because it does make sense, and everyone will come to agree with us. But sometimes when it fires off, and we feel like we're the only ones hearing it, then that's when it becomes challenging to really
Mhm.
listen to it,
Mhm. Mhm.
because the other part of us by nature is that we are pack animals by nature. We love the approval and the collective
Yeah.
company of other people. And when
Mhm.
we start operating in a way that doesn't feel aligned to the status quo or everybody else, we then begin to negotiate that feeling that we're getting that we can't really explain, as opposed
Right.
to really listening to it, because people around us will say, oh, that's crazy, or that doesn't make any sense. Oh, you're just a worrier, or like, well, people will try to explain it away when they don't
Mhm.
understand it. And so then we rationalize and don't listen to it ourselves. So absolutely.
Right, right. And the biggest power of influence is social pressure. It's
Hmm.
true. So even if it's, real or imagined, to be fair, because sometimes those people don't actually say those things, but we tell
Oh yeah.
ourselves, oh well, if I do this, they'll think that, or I,
Yes. That's
various
so funny. It
excuses.
is it is mostly imagined, because we do think the entire world is going to line up at our door and knock on our door and say, "That's crazy, stop doing that."
What are
And
you
that's
doing?
right, right, right. Right. And what we don't realize is everybody else is worried about that too, so nobody's
Right.
looking at
They
you.
all think the same thing. I know that there has been times in the past where I tend to just say what I'm thinking. I'm that person. And other people will after the meeting go, I was thinking the same thing. Thank you for saying that, right?
Yes,
Like, no
yes,
problem. I'll hang myself out there.
yes, totally, totally.
So, Carol, this is fascinating discussion. So, I want to learn more about what you're seeing. Some of people who are like maybe not paying attention to that gut feeling. What are they struggling with, and then how can they get overcome it? I also want to say hi to Mohammed, who just hopped on. Great to see you, Mohammed. So, what's going on there, and how can they maybe leverage that? Are there some tools, tactics, techniques, tricks, thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, primarily I work with people at midlife, right? So I
Mhm.
work with people who have followed a pre-described kind of way of being for a lot of years. And so really well entrenched in a way of going about their career, a way about of going about things, have achieved success, are really locked into the title, the status, the money, and things of that nature. And so for me, one of the big challenges is letting that go, or the belief
Mm,
that if
right.
I were even to explore something different, that it would mean all of this would go away, or all of this would be for
All or
nothing.
nothing thinking.
Exactly, 100%.
Yeah.
If I even look in a different direction, like everything I've worked for will disappear.
Mhm.
And there's also the fear of starting over, of feeling as if I put in too much time and years that to do something different. Uh, you know, and even the concept of doing something different, I think is a misconcept, because really we don't do things differently. We kind of pivot or shift a little bit. We bring everything that we have to the table in terms
Mhm.
of what we do. So we're really not. But this idea of starting over, being a novice again, being in that feeling that, I've reached this high, now I have to jump back and go back to the end of the line and start over
Mhm.
again. And these are just myths and misconceptions that that people are really holding. And so for me, what the first thing that I believe that is so important to do is to reconnect with the skill sets, the knowledge, the gifts, the superpowers, if you will, that I call them, that you have
Mhm.
inherently, and not just from external things that you're holding your hat on or being validated by. And
Right.
so for me, that means, not just leaning on the fact that you have these degrees. Like, I could
Mm.
totally do that, but I'm not practicing law, nor am I in academia, even though I have both of those degrees. But I
Mhm.
have a wealth of knowledge and wisdom and experience and skill sets from those experiences that I can leverage in many different ways. And I
Absolutely.
think that's the key thing, is to really lean back into what are my natural talents and gifts that I
Mhm.
love to do, that I do well.
Mhm.
I love Gay Hendricks' work when he talks about your zone of genius, right?
Yes, the
And how
zone
he
of genius
talks
is my
about,
favorite. Yeah.
oh, it's amazing. And he talks
Yeah.
about people who get stuck in the zone of excellence. And for
Mhm.
me, I define that, or I see that as people who are leaning on the external skills, the external
Mhm.
degrees, the external things that they can hold out to say, see, because I have this, that means I know that or can do that, as
Right, and it's that
opposed to me.
superstition. They talk
Yes,
about the
absolutely.
superstition because,
Yes.
what we call success superstition. So, "Oh, I did
Hmm.
this, and I'm successful, so therefore all these things that I've done are must work." When in
Yes.
fact, you oftentimes are successful in spite of yourself.
Exactly, exactly. But we don't track that. And so this internal zone of genius, these things that we're naturally gifted at, the things that we
Mhm.
do in
Mhm.
everything in our everyday work that we don't pay attention to because it comes so natural, we don't really lean into that and see the
No.
breadth and depth of what that is. And when you can do that, one of the things, I was just working with a client the other day, and one of the things she said to me, which is exactly true in this process, is that all of a sudden her world opened up to her. That from
Mm.
thinking that this was the path, that this was the only track, that this is the only way, all of a sudden things that seemed impossible became very possible, and not daunting and not
Mm.
unnatural, but all of a
Mm.
sudden the world opened up. And so how you can then apply yourself, how you can leverage those natural gifts and genius into doing something that's much more in tune to you, and leverage your education, your degrees, your experience,
Right.
and all bring
Right.
all of that to bear. You're not
Mhm.
starting over, you're just pivoting and taking that someplace else. It's like, just packing up your marbles and going to another sandbox. It doesn't mean that you have to rebuild the sandbox or things of that nature, but
Right.
you're able to really leverage that and move into a space that is equally, if not better, than where you are now. And
Mhm.
that's getting over the hump of thinking that if I even make the move, something's bad going to happen, as opposed to really leaning into what you have to offer and expanding the possibilities.
Right.
Then all of a sudden you can step into something that's much more aligned to you, so that you have what I call career life alignment, not balance, but alignment, so that who you are and what you do beautifully sing well together, and you can get paid for it and be successful at doing it.
Absolutely. Like I tell people, your next best step is the intersection of your strengths, interests, and expertise. Notice I didn't just say strengths and interest. I also said expertise. There's no need to just leave behind the value that you put into your career thus far. Oftentimes we can leverage it. And when just very similar, we don't have to say, oh gosh, I have to start from scratch. Oftentimes that's not the case. In fact, I don't necessarily recommend it unless you truly want to. Like, just say you've been an engineer all your life and you want to be a vet. Okay, let's do that if that's where your heart is, follow that dream.
Yeah.
And also, like you mentioned, encourage people. What we do oftentimes is focus on what we don't want. So whenever we think about possibilities, we start focusing all on bad stuff. Well, this could happen, that could happen, or and that's terrible. We're not looking at the positive side of it at all. You're catastrophizing everything. So a few folks have tuned in who's saying, always great to see you. He's tuned in. Adrian, good to see you. She says, inherent skills and natural talent. All right.
Yes. Your superpowers. That's what I call them. Right?
Superpowers. Look at that. So Hussein, who's also very thoughtful in his questions, he said, hello, Erin. I also want to welcome your guest. So he says, hi to you too, Carol. He says, over the past 28 years, I've worked in more than one job, and each of them differs from the other. But the presence of a qualified team always helps me to excel. So including the work team was the most important work when I moved to a new job. And then the creativity stage begins, he mentioned. So it's not just all about him. He's saying it's also a little bit about the people he's around, tuning into that cultural element.
I would also add, I bet also you probably have a natural gift of seeing and leaning into the people around you. A lot of people get a good team and don't even recognize it, or don't know how to utilize them in a way that makes your time there very successful. So I would even go as far as to say, probably one of your own natural gifts is the ability to really lean into people, to make people feel supported and encouraged, so that you can form this absolute amazing team to be great. Because sometimes people have good teams but don't know how to utilize them well. So kudos to you for that.
Oftentimes, unfortunately, and that's one of the reasons I think we're seeing the Great Resignation right now.
Oh man, Oh yeah. I mean, and today, in this kind of new economy, or like what I like to call the new work revolution, the skill sets that are being looked at or necessary now are more human-centric and human-focused, and they're more crossing across boundaries. They're crossing boundaries as opposed to being more specific. Like, how do you problem solve? What are your critical analytical skills? How are you utilizing data and technology? How are you being a leader, not just you yourself, but supporting others to be able to be led and to rise and be better at what they do, and things of that nature. So I think exactly. And so I really think right now in this economy, with what we've been experiencing, and even though there's a growth of technology, what I think a lot of employers or companies are looking for are people who also have a very human-centric approach, because at the end of the day, we're still working with each other. And because we're working in so much uncertainty right now, there's such a need for people that have a deft hand to be able to support and mentor and guide other people, but also work in a way that's adaptable, flexible, and can deal with, uncertainty and a lot of changes right now. And that takes a skill set that, was not necessarily, that people may put on a resume, or comes from a degree, or comes from a certification program. Those are skills that often are just inherently within you, that you just have to tap into and really put forth in this new way of working that we have right now.
Right. It's very interesting you mentioned that, because what we're finding, and for those of you who don't know, or just tuning in, or haven't seen any of my posts at all, I'm not saying anybody has, because how it is, but I'm also attending Coach Rice, the Doer Institute for New Leaders, and doing an ICF accredited course there. So I'm
Mm.
amongst my fellow executive coaches. And one of the things that we're talking about right now that's trending and upward trending is the fact that in order to see true professional growth, you need to have personal growth. So that's
Mhm.
becoming more of a component of one's professional growth is the
Yes.
development of self.
Yes.
And it has been historically not necessarily a focus. In fact, it was a little bit shunned historically. It's not, oh, we don't get to the touchy feely stuff. What's that?
Mhm.
Oh, there's no place for that in business. I don't know how many times I've heard, well, there's no, personal and professional. And
Yes.
if you think for a moment that you're closing the door in your personal life when you go to work or log into the workplace, I have another thing for you might want to consider.
Yes. Yes.
You have
Oh, I
to
love
allow
that
that
you
with
brought that
you.
up. I so love that you brought that up because that's what I mean about these old
Mhm.
kind of archaic ways that we've been taught
Right.
about
Mhm.
developing our career that has been bifurcated, right? That is like, this is personal, this is professional, and that I just have to keep my head down and like improve my skill sets as opposed to developing as a person and bringing the fullness of me authentically to the place. That's why I talk a lot about career life alignment, that
Right.
they're not separated, that your
Right.
career is part of that greater ecosystem of who you
Mhm.
are. And
Yeah.
it's really all of that that you're bringing to the table. And that is what employers are looking for. And as
Mhm.
employers are getting that and are opening space for that, what I'm finding is that it's not trickling down to the minds and hearts of employees, people who are looking for positions or trying to promote or pivot, that they're
Mhm.
still holding on to these old ways of doing things. And
Mhm.
so when I start talking with them about, no, we're going to dig in deep into you,
Yeah.
initially it's like,
They're
what?
like, "Wait a
No,
minute,
just
what?"
just update my resume, right? I see my resume updated
I
in my
know.
LinkedIn profile. I'm like,
What
no,
credential do I need? I need
right, right,
what certification?
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Do I
Yeah.
go back to school? Do I get a certification? I mean, that's been drilled into our minds as the way
Mhm.
to advance in our careers. And I love that you said that because it truly is about the personal development as part of your professional
Mhm.
development. And that is the trick, that is the new revolution of work
Yeah.
in the new economy. And if we're not getting that, you will not find the success that you are hoping to have. You will be stalled and
Mhm.
stuck where you are because you're not becoming, as I talked about before, adaptable and changeable. We live in a time of uncertainty, and those who succeed aren't the times who are using old techniques that worked in the past, but those who could look at the past and be adaptable and fluid about what could potentially happen and how do we roll, change, and adjust. And that does take a much personal development as it does professional development. So I
Yeah.
love that you said that.
Yeah, we can talk. Have a feeling we will stay here for a little while on the Pure Coffee Chat Live today. I want to say thank you to Muhammad. He sent a shout out to Hussein. He says you have to acknowledge your team and learn from each
Yeah.
other and everyone. You have some inner skill, as Dr. Carroll says. Super skills.
Yes.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Superpowers.
Absolutely.
Rosanna, thank you very much. She said, great podcast. I'll be replaying it. So much good information. Of course, it's always available, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook.
Awesome.
Don't forget to sign up to the YouTube channel as well. And also have a Crew Coffee Chat business page on LinkedIn. Woo!
Woo!
We're fancy. But it's true. I mean, and I'm so glad we're articulating this now because it's really, I think it's gelled in the last 6 months
Mhm.
that while we're not in a new normal yet, I don't know if there's going to be a normal for a
No.
while. We're in
No.
very strong change cycle.
Yeah,
We'll continue to
very
see
strong. We
that.
are in the midst of
Very,
the storm. I used to
very,
always
yeah.
say, my pastor used to always tell me that you're either in a storm, coming out of the storm, or going into a storm. You're either in it, coming out of it, or heading back into it. And I feel like,
Yeah.
yes, and right now we are in it. We are
I
not
can see it.
stabilized yet. It
Yeah.
is still
Mhm.
anybody's game. And this is such an opportune time to really lean back and to
Mhm.
reflect on what it is that you have to offer, to do that excavation, I like to call it, that archaeological dig, and
Mhm.
really uncover all of what you bring to the table, and throw away the typical vernacular and words that we use to describe things and start building, going into deeper layers, right?
Mhm.
If you say you have strong leadership skills, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? Dig deep to, is it because you're a great listener? Is it because you're great at supporting and nurturing other other people? Is it because you are fabulous at reading the room and being able to see like you're a puzzle piece, you love to put puzzles together, so you can read the room and see what's missing, and you know how to plug in something that would be useful and helpful for the bigger vision to move forward. I mean, look at those skills that you have and really start digging deep to find that personal, deeper connection.
Yes.
And that right now, in this midst of uncertainty, that's what's going to really rise and help you to navigate the terrain that we're in right now until we do come to, a different normal, right? Because we're not going to go back to what we were. It's going to be some other iteration. So, as Betty Davis says, a bumpy ride. So fasten your seatbelts. It's a bumpy ride. So, we have to, really shift and change our traditional ways of thinking to release that and start stepping into the new iteration of how you do your work. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say hi to Mariama.
Hi.
From YouTube. Good to see you.
Welcome.
Again, don't be shy if you have questions, thoughts. For any of you, how does that feel for you, that analogy? I love that analogy. You're either in the storm, you're moving out of the storm, or you're going into another one. While that may seem kind of dark, it's actually not necessarily, because it's just about change.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just as I shared with a coaching client years ago, he goes, I feel like I'm kind of just on a plateau right now. I've got some really great progress. And I said, well, you're trying it out. Like you're getting used to it for the next iteration. And sure enough, because there's a change, and then we coast for a little while, and that settles in, and we get used to it, and we're starting to adopt to it and mold into that. And then something else happens, and then so that's life.
That's absolutely life. And I find that these times are when the lessons are the greatest lessons are when you're in the midst of the storm, because then, as you said, you come out of it so much more informed, equipped, and ready, and at a different level, so that when the next one comes, you're ready for it, and then you grow and you come out at another level. So it's all about growth through the human span and the lifespan. It is life. It is what we go through life. And that's basically what it is.
Yeah, I think we're starting to really see the dissolution of that work-life separation. That is no longer the case. It's not really, as you mentioned, the balance per se, as in you shut off one and the other starts. I do feel like there's spaces we need to create throughout our day, for sure. Setting boundaries, that's healthy.
Oh, absolutely.
And understanding how that work-life blend works for you. And most importantly, to your point, developing the self, because we're mentioning a lot of things around resilience, what you might want to call resilience, that adaptability, that flexibility. A lot of people think, well, it's just true grit. You just power through it. No, actually, it's all about working on self.
Yes.
So back to that part of self-development. Personal development is a core part of professional development. The same thing goes for resilience. It starts here inside.
Absolutely.
It's not just about powering through something.
No, you only have so much energy to power through. That will give away. And powering through doesn't open you up to learning and growing, so that you can flow with it. It's like being in water and resisting it, as opposed to like letting yourself float with it, right? And so resilience, that part of that is like going with it and learning and adapting through it, as opposed to I'm just going to hold my breath, because there's no growth, there's no learning that comes from that. And actually that can burn. That's the thing that burns you out and frustrates you and gets you stuck.
Yeah, she said, Mariama says, it's hard at times to see the lessons when we're in the storm. Sometimes, that's a good point, because that's why I fully believe in the power of reflection. For all my clients, we all, I personally have a reflection practice. We all have a reflection practice. I encourage that in my clients, because it's true. In the moment, we don't necessarily see the lesson.
No.
It's when we take the time to pause and reflect. And then we see the experience. That's when we evolve. Maybe not like right in it, but it's the after. It's the reflection that's so powerful. So speaking of,
that's 100% true. I always, when I'm going through stuff, I do ask myself. I've taught myself to stop and say, okay, I'm in the middle of something. What do I need to learn? I just like yelling out, what's the lesson? And even though it doesn't come to me in the moment, you're totally right. I spend a lot of times just reflecting and analyzing what are my thoughts? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Like, what am I seeing and experiencing? What's the relationship? That reflective piece is so powerful, because as you come out of it, you can then look at that and start to see the formation. It's like little pieces floating around that becomes clear once you're out of it, so that you can really see what the lesson is. Yes. And then start the implementation of it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when you're in the middle of it, you actually can't, because your brain is engaged in other activities.
Right. Well, survival for what?
Right. I mean, you're just engaged in other activities. So your brain hasn't had time to, disseminate the information, download it, cross compare, blah, blah, blah. All these things have to happen. That's absolutely.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. Like when I was in the middle of my accident, I wasn't like, what's the lesson here? It took a minute. It was in the recovery that I was able to start really thinking. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. When you're in the middle of it, it's you're in protective, safety, survival mode. And so all your primitive instincts are going to come forward, not that prefrontal part that's going to think and logic through. But it's a great opportunity to just note and pay attention, so that as you come out of it, you can reflect on it in a way, so you can see, oh, this is what this was trying to teach me, or this is what I needed to get from that.
I learned. This is what I learned about myself, or this is how I grew. And also acknowledge yourself. We don't do that. We don't do a good job of that, especially driven professional women. Don't do a good job at acknowledging and appreciating ourselves.
No. We're very bad at that. Very bad at that.
Yeah. And it's important as a part of that reflection process to say, hey, what can I acknowledge myself for today? And just starting to develop a practice of that, because I will share with you one of the core around, just the tenets of success really revolves around self. How you see yourself.
Yes.
And if you don't love yourself, yes, I use the LOV word, LOV word. Yeah. If you don't love yourself, then chances are you won't invest in yourself. You won't believe in yourself. You won't put yourself out there. So when we're, probably, I don't know about you, Dr. Carol, what do you think when you start working with women, particularly when they're at that midlife or any sort of career wake-up call? How much of that diving into that core confidence, that self-belief do you do? And what do you see from that?
Yeah. Well, it is the first and deep and heart of what I do. We start there because we can't do anything else until we really uncover that truth. One of the activities I have my clients do is to do what I call a hundreds list. And I have them write down 100 things that they've done over the course of their lives that they have achieved, accomplished, that they're proud of, that excites them. And the reason I have them do that is so that they can reflect back on the successes and the things that they've done well. Because like you said, most often, particularly women, we do something and we just put it to the side and move on to what's next. And we don't reflect on, oh, that was a great thing, or I stepped up and had courage there, or I, took that chance, or I took that risk, or I was able to, make that happen when no one thought it could happen. And when we can see that, it gives us the proof and the evidence that as we move forward to do something different, that we've already done it. And so we're just relying on that strength to continue to move forward. But yeah, the deep dive is so important. To get back to understanding self, that self-reflection, that understanding the things that motivate you and inspire you, those deep-seated values, those belief systems, or then limiting belief systems, those narratives. Oh my goodness, the narratives that we've inherited or that we have formed that we think are true that really aren't. So there is a lot of work that we start with this, and like you talked, this cognitive work that we do, this deep self-reflective work, this, like I call it an excavation, almost like an archaeological dig, to really get in there and ask those questions that we really never give ourselves the space to do. Like I said, it's high achieving, ambitious, like we're going for that brass ring. Oftentimes I find that when I ask my clients, so tell me about yourself, that is hard to answer that without saying what I do. because it
Ooh.
really is about shifting identity, from moving your career identity to understanding who you are. Like, who's your career or your job is part of your identity. It is not all of your identity. But when we often ask that question, it comes with like a full-fledged resume of everything that either was done, or their credentials or the job titles. But to really ask yourself, who am I and what do I do? And who am, what am I about? That's
Right.
a question that we don't often ask ourselves
Mm-mm.
or spend the time to really find the answer to. And that is the core of the work that you're meant to do in the world. Like, out of that nugget of juicy,
Right.
delicious fabulousness of you is really what brings out what the work you're meant to do in the world. I mean,
Mhm.
it really, the connection to that is so powerful. But doing that work takes time. It takes an ability to have some quietness, to pull away from a lot of things around you. And too much of us don't give ourselves that time
Right.
and space to do it. And to be honest, our society isn't designed to give you that time and space to do it.
No,
It's go,
we're
go,
all more,
go,
more, more,
do,
more.
do, do.
Yep,
Yeah, more, more,
Mhm.
more. And so to say, no, I'm going to stop for a moment and do this work, it's really challenging. I mean, holding that space. And for me, the biggest thing that I could do with my clients is help to hold the space for them to be able to do that work, because it is so easy to either do it from the place like it's an assignment. So let me just do it because I'm used to getting it done,
True
but
grit.
not do the reflective work to
Right.
say, what does it mean about me? What am I
Mhm.
learning about me? How is this answering some questions that were lingering about me? Because the truth is, as a coach, our jobs are to really help to guide you to find the answer that you already know. It's like to help you to unlock the key,
Mhm.
unlock the door that you've kind of sealed, that needs to open up so you can actually explore and express and understand these aspects of yourself, to help give you the clarity and guidance to make the right decisions and choices that you want to make. Not that you think should be made, or what society says you should make, or what the job
Mhm.
says you should do, or the traditional career ladder of whatever position that you're in, but
Right.
what do
It's
you want to do
someone
that
who
makes
does.
sense?
Right. And
Absolutely.
we've ignored that.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Oh my
historically in
goodness.
business, we have not put the heart in business. So I guess
No.
if I was to redo my tagline, I would say I'm here to put the heart back in
Yeah.
professionalism, because it's been absent for so long.
Yeah.
We need to bring our full selves. It's a different time. It calls for different skill sets and a different approach.
Yes.
And I think if you were to take something that's kind of awesome out of the pandemic, I know that sounds weird, but when you're looking for something that might be good, is the fact that people have had a pause, some forced,
Yes.
some not. They've had that time to reflect a little bit. And I think that's one reason why we're seeing the great resignation, because now they're more in tune with, I know I don't want that.
Yes.
And I've really enjoyed this, and this is meaningful for me. So they're starting to realign what their priorities are, because before it's been work and work and more work, and oh yeah, if you're going to be a leader, you should work all your given time. You should never have a life.
Right.
That's a falsehood.
Absolutely.
That's not a requirement.
No, not at
This is a
all.
false structure that we've created
Hmm.
that doesn't need to continue. And
Yeah.
Mariama said, self-acknowledgement resonates with me. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. I
Yes.
really recommend, you know what, as a part of reflection practice, even if it's just once a week,
Oh,
just
yeah.
take 5, 10 minutes.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
what did
Yeah.
I accomplish this week?
Yeah.
What can I acknowledge that I was
Yes.
able to do? Even if it was, I didn't yell at the kids. They were running around. I didn't yell at the dog.
Yeah.
I got up. I got coffee. I didn't yell at anybody. It's only 8 o'clock, but we're good.
Yeah.
Whatever that
Yeah.
means for you.
I love
Let's
it.
see.
I love
It
it.
sounds like you're giving us permission to consider ourselves first when making decisions.
Yes. Oh, powerful. Powerful.
Yes, yes.
100%. 100%. Yes, to
Yeah.
prioritize yourself. Yeah. I joke and I call the great resignation the great realization, because I
Mhm.
think that's what
Very
people are
true.
having,
Yeah.
is a real realization of what they can do and what's possible for them, and absolutely give yourself permission to consider yourself. I love that, because, like I said, when I often ask people, like, how would you describe yourself, or who are you, or those type of things, it's always so past focused or resume focused, or like I said, for the education that you have, or the title, or so on and so forth. But what's true is that to be future focused, about to really lean into what's possible for you and what you want to do next and what you want to step into next, that doesn't have to be defined by what you did in the past. You have the ability, leaning into giving yourself permission, as you said so beautifully, Deadrian, to really lean into who you are, what you want. You have the ability now to create a new future for yourself, because the future hasn't been written. So you have the opportunity to take all of that and use it as a platform to step into what you're going to do next, as opposed to using what we've done in the past as just the end result of all we could ever possibly do in the future, because that's not true. That's the beauty of reflecting and asking ourselves those questions, and the lessons that we learned, and acknowledging the things that we've accomplished, and really seeing who we are, because we can take all of that and step into a new iteration of whatever we want to design for our future, because tomorrow is not here. So you can
That's
create the
right.
tomorrow that you want. That is so powerful.
It
But
is
we
true. Yeah.
we get held captive by our past, and we have to
Mhm.
understand that that is nothing but a stepping stone to where we could potentially go in the future, and we have to look at it that way.
Right. Right. I love this statement that says our past informs you. Your
Yes,
past informs you, but it does not determine you.
absolutely,
You
absolutely.
determine you, and you determine what success looks like, what you want to be. Here's the thing. One of the reasons I got into coaching is I had a wake up call that I talk about in my book. Sorry, Year of My Career, Elevate Your Career for More Impact and Income. And up until that point, I'll admit that I had a fixed mindset. Okay. I have a fixed mindset. I didn't believe that I could change who I was or how I acted or whatever. This was predetermined. It was in my DNA, or just who I am, right? And this was
Yes.
my early, late 20s, early 30s. I really believed that I was just a fixed person. And yeah, I was kind of a pain in the butt to work with. High achiever, had the certifications, really good at what I did, but
Mhm.
yeah. So I had some opportunities, and I had a wake up moment during performance review time. Some of you are getting ready for performance review time. So this was also during that time of the year. I walked in expecting the usual pat on the back, no real raise, and had the words, oh well, after he's, oh, you do a really good job, blah blah blah. However,
Ooh.
we have some concerns, and it was really around I wasn't developing interpersonal relationships. And, up until that point, I hadn't realized that I could change. And through several sequence of events and an awesome mentor stepping in to help me realize for the first time I can change. It was
Mm.
that moment in the very first personal improvement book, which I thought was only for people who had problems, and I don't have problems.
Right, right,
I don't
right.
know problem things. I didn't need to be working on myself. Right. So after like the second or third chapter, I was like, oh my God, why don't they teach this in high school? I would have avoided a lot of pain in my life. And it's like recognizing that, oh, I have so much more impact. And here's the thing, all of you tuning in, I know Dr. Carroll will agree with me. You have so much more impact than you give yourself credit for.
Yes.
Like you just take a moment and just reflect on this, because even the little things, and
Mm.
social psychologists say even the most introverted individual who doesn't like leaving their home and liked being in the lockdown, okay, that person will impact over 20,000 people in their lifetime. Now imagine how many people all of you impact, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, just putting that
Yeah.
out there. Putting that out there because
Love that.
you are the author of your future.
Love it. 100%. Yeah. And please don't let, like that saying you said, don't let your past define your future. It's there as a learning tool, but it is not, the chapter is not finished. The book has not been written. You still have so much more that's possible for you. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is that we define our future based on our past. We look at our past and say, well, I've only been able to get this far, therefore I can never go further. And I always say that we can't see beyond our own limitations, right? And so if we are stuck in those limitations of thinking this is as far as we can go, we can't believe, we can't possibly see, where we can go. It's funny, I was having a conversation with my daughter last night, who right now she's a CNA, which is a great role, great job. But she wants to go ultimately to medical school. And so she's doing it to get the experience. And, she said that, sometimes I feel bad because I'm surrounded by other people who are CNAs, and, they love it and they want to stay in that career. But for me, it's a stepping stone to where I want to go. And I said that's okay. For some, being a CNA is a great job. It's a great profession. And if people want to do that, that's great. But you shouldn't feel bad because you want to do something else or something different, or what you're perceiving as more, because you have the capacity to believe that's something that you can do. And because you have the capacity to believe of the possibility that you can even do something like that, you're going to try to go for something like that. But for a lot of people, when we can't see beyond our own limitations, when we can't see the possibility of doing something different, then sometimes, and I'm not saying this for CNAs, anybody who's listening to CNA, but sometimes we just end up settling for something because we don't believe that anything else is possible, right? So we settle for what I call good enough, as opposed to going for something better, because we just don't believe that that's possible. And so that's why I always say we can't see beyond our own limitations. And that's why it's so powerful for me. Yeah. That we have to see those for what they are and break through them, because that's all they are just belief patterns that we've accepted as truth when they're not at all. They're just thoughts that can be shifted and changed so that you can open up to what's possible for you in your life.
Absolutely. And on the flip side of that, there, from time to time, I coach driven emerging leaders, and sometimes these are more, later stage leaders, and they come to me and go, I don't like what I'm doing. I really liked when I was at this role. I was doing some individual contributing. That gave me fulfillment. So they had passed their zone of genius. They kept going, and they were like, oh, wait a minute. I really like to turn left back there, and I just kept going. And they feel like they should be moving up the ladder. So here's for you.
I hate that.
Okay.
Stop shitting. Stop shitting on yourself.
Stop shitting on yourself. You don't have to. For those people who are either happy in your current role, be happy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Or if you don't want to keep moving up the ladder because that's not your zone of genius, then stay in your zone of genius. Truly, that's your state of flow. That's where you need to be. There's some things that I could have kept moving up the ladder. In fact, I tried it. I left at the level of director of continuous improvement, because at that level, I was going to be traveling 80% of the time.
Yeah.
I tried. Did not work. It was miserable. So I knew that, no, this is not for me.
Yeah. Well, and see, that's the key though. You knew for you, this wasn't right for you. And that's the thing, is that you shouldn't do it because it seems like the thing you should do. You want to do something that's right for you. Like, I've worked with clients who've come to me like, I want to leave this place. I hate my job. I'm in the wrong place. But really, in the end, they found out actually they do love their work, that they are in the right place, but it's just they either weren't showing up in the way they wanted to show up. They didn't have the confidence in themselves. They weren't seeing themselves as the leader they were, that really the internal personal development work wasn't done. And when that work was done, she actually looked around and thought, actually, I do like this work. I am in a good place. I do have some really good opportunities. I can make a difference. Like, she was able to see things differently because she was able to do that more personal work. So doing something you love doesn't necessarily mean you have to do something different. It just means that maybe you just need to get clear on what it is that's right for you, that makes sense for you, that's authentic to you. Lean into that space, bring those things closer together. And then you realize you may be in the best place of all. It's funny, after we started working together, she went from wanting to leave to her boss being called in by the CEO and giving her a retention bonus and having her speak at conferences on their behalf. Like all of a sudden she showed up in a way because she was more confident and self-assured and knew what she really wanted and saw that it actually was in front of her, and then started taking advantage of those opportunities that were right there all along. But because she had been stuck in this way of thinking that, well, XYZ isn't happening, therefore I should leave. No, it really, XYZ wasn't happening because she hadn't moved out of, like, you know, the fixed mindset to the growth mindset. She hadn't really done that personal development work to really see her value, her worth, her potential, her interests, her desires. And once she got clear on that, she saw the alignment between where she was. It was really powerful. So yeah, it doesn't mean you gotta leave.
Back to this.
Yes.
We do. We keep coming back to this. So
yes.
So I'd love to say, Maryam asked, what's a CNA? It's a certified.
Certified nurse assistant. Yeah.
So before we wrap up the show, I want to just leave our listeners, and for those watching the replay later, of course, with what are some tidbits? You know, we keep coming back to that work on self, right? Understanding what your zone of genius, understanding what your priorities are, what your values are, where you want to show up. Yeah. And what's some easy steps or things that people could consider to start opening up that avenue and exploring that more so they can create an ideal career path for themselves?
Yeah. One of the things that you can do is take a look back. I call it a chunks of 10 exercise, right? Take a look back over, look at the decades over your life and really start looking at what were the things that I were doing that brought me joy? What are the things that I was doing without even thinking about it? What were the things that people kept telling me, you're so good at this, or you're so natural at this, or the things you were praised for or complimented for? It doesn't have to be work. It could have been something personal, a volunteer. It could have been something an aunt or uncle told you, or something your best friend relayed to you. It could be a number of things, but look over the decades of your life. And the reason I say do it this way is because what we often forget is over the lifespan we grow and change. Like for some reason we have this idea that we have to pick a thing and that our life is just, and that's not the way it works. We grow, we develop, we change, so you have to really capture what you may have been interested at 10 doesn't mean you're interested at 30, but the things maybe you were good at 10 may resonate with the things that you love to do when you were 30. So you start looking for the through thread that really speaks to almost like the top. You could probably even come up with the top 5 themes that you see are the commonality of things that have happened throughout your life. And this is irregardless of, like I said, looking at the outside stuff like the degrees or things of that nature, but really leaning into that through thread that has gone through the course of your life that really signal and identifies your particular superpowers, right? I use that analogy because I love Marvel and superhero stuff. So but just like, Wonder Woman has her talents and Superman has his and Aquaman, they all have they're all superheroes, but they all have their own through thread and they all have their origin stories. So, right. So there's something about through their life that they were able to hone and develop the superpower that they have. And that is so true for you. All of us have our own superpowers. We just have to figure out what they are so that we can activate them and implement them in the world. And by going back and looking over these decades of your life and asking yourself these questions and seeing the through thread and the themes that emerge will give you a tremendous amount of insight into what it is that, you really should lean into and what you're absolutely amazing at doing.
Yeah. I mean, I call them your gifts. And oftentimes these are overlooked. We take them for granted because they come so naturally.
Yeah.
They're just a part of who you are. You don't really even need to think about it.
Yes.
It's not something you necessarily have to develop as a skill. There's a difference between a gift and a skill. Some, take true athletes, like top athletes. You have to admit there's giftedness there, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's something inherent because I love cycling. You will not see me in the Tour de France, which is the largest cycling event in the world. You will not see me there. Just not, like I love it. I'm passionate about it, but I don't have no gift. So that's something else to keep in mind when you're thinking about these things. Even if you are super passionate about something, make sure your strengths and gifts are aligned, because
Great
being
point.
passionate about something that may not necessarily be serving you.
Great point. Great point. I'm passionate about singing. I was always in choir, sang in church, all that kind of stuff. I am no Beyonce. Like I'm no, like I am not, that's not the level. But in my shower, I can, and I love
Shower if you're on
singing. I
stage.
love in cars and everything else, and I've done those type of things. But I know that's not the gift that I have. I know I have other gifts that other people don't have, right? And that's the case with all of us, right? There's certain things that really speak to you, that are unique to you, that make you the amazing, incredible person that you are.
Right. And Deidre just mentioned, she said, activate and implement.
Yes.
I
I love that. That's like a superhero thing. Activate, implement.
You know, a superhero cake.
Right, exactly.
That is so true. We all have gifts. And here's the other thing. Sometimes those gifts aren't obvious. Like they express themselves as this thing because maybe of what you've done or just how you live your life, but they're really something else. Even if it's something that you are really good at avoiding doing, it may be buried in there. So take courage and dive in and try to be curious. That's what I love. Just be curious. Be curious about yourself. Go explore.
Well, and own it too. Like I was working with another client, and she was trying to like kind of locate something that she's really good at. And so she said, well, I listen well. And she said it like, that's nothing. But I said, but listening is really powerful, because you're such a good listener, the work that you do is helping people to be heard and helping people to, you're able to pull things out of others because you're able to hear things in a way that either they're not hearing or others don't hear. Like listening is a superpower. And before she thought about it as nothing, but that's the other thing. When you come across your gifts, don't poo-poo them as nothing. Really lean into them to see like how is this great ability to listen or to nurture or to talk to people or to connect or whatever you come up with, see how it has enhanced or helped you in other areas of your life or even in your career itself. And you'll see that just because you're a good listener is not just anything. It's something really powerful that has helped you become successful in a lot of ways that you probably didn't even realize.
Absolutely. Try not to rate or judge your own gift. Please.
Yes, please. Please.
Don't rate or judge your gift. Yes. Here's the thing. I mean, some gifts are not sexy. Like you're like, oh, I'm really good at X, Y, or Z. Well, it's still a valid and very powerful gift.
Yeah.
Give yourself gratitude and acknowledge that for you. Yeah. Not everybody has to be the most amazing public speaker in the world.
Right.
To be successful, to have a superpower. You don't have to rate or judge your gift just because you can't melt people from afar versus having infrared vision doesn't mean you're a lesser or better super.
Yes. Right. Superman is not better than Wonder Woman.
Look at there, just saying. So, Carol, it's been a fantastic pleasure having you on the show. And if any of you tuning in later, watching the replay, have any questions, feel free to reach out to either one of us or comment on the replay itself. We'll be notified. We'll certainly get back to you. We'd love to have your comments and questions. That's something. And be sure to reach out to Dr. Carol directly. You can find her at carolparkerwalsh.com. And of course on LinkedIn as well. Reach out to our LinkedIn. And don't forget, Career Coffee Chat Show is live also on YouTube. We have a LinkedIn business page. We've got all the things going on. So feel free to like, follow, go out there to your podcast channel, Spotify. It's everywhere. There's some places I've never even heard of. So go out there, give us a thumbs up, give us a star rating, whatever works for you. We want to make sure that we're there and being able to give value to those of you who are tuning in either live or the podcast later on. And Carol, it's been, again, thank you.
Oh, this
So
has
much
been
fun.
fabulous. You're so awesome.
It's been
And
so
thank
much
you for everybody
fun.
to listen. I mean, I love it. I
Yeah.
love the participation. This has been
Thank you.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been Cornisha. Cornisha, have you been lurking? She said, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yay. So, such a pleasure having you on. And for
Thank
now,
you.
we'll wrap up the show. Just keep in mind, friends, keep elevating.